Recording started.
Hey, I want to welcome everybody to this week's Matrexit discussion group call, as in exiting the Matrix. This is for tactical sovereignty. This is April 10th, 2020. Like I always say, beautiful Sunday, the first day of the week, not the 7th, therefore also not the Sabbath. If you haven't figured that one out, well, that's another deception you probably should look into. But tonight I'm going to be talking about a couple of issues that I think are very important to people, and at least one of which is one of the biggest questions that people have, which would be, why are we here? And the second question would be, our rights. What are our rights? You probably wouldn't think that those two things would be very connected, but they are extremely connected. They are very, very connected. In fact, they are so connected, they are inseparable, believe it or not. If you get into it and really start researching those things, studying those things, you start seeing how connected they are and how joined at the hip they are. You're not going to have one without the other. Your purpose for being here and your rights go hand in hand with each other. And that's exactly what I want to get into this evening. I've spoken many times. In fact, there's really no reason to be looking at me for this, because I want people to be thinking about this topic. This topic is very important. I've told people many times that when I first went on my journey, whether you want to call it the truth movement or whatever you want to describe it as, we start running into a lot of different people that are teaching a lot of different things. And a lot of those people, as I was listening to them, the things they were saying just didn't jive. They just didn't quite seem correct. Something just felt wrong. Something just didn't feel right. And to me, one of my basic personal laws and rules in life is, if you're in a situation and something just doesn't quite feel right, the reason why is because, guess what? It's not right. There is something wrong going on. And having that feeling, listening to a lot of these different teachers, gurus, whatever you want to call them, I decided that what I needed to do was step away from listening to some of these people and start studying some of these details on their own merit, one of which being your rights. And a lot of people that you hear talk about rights, for instance, they will say, if you don't exercise your rights, you don't have any rights. Or they'll say, if you don't know your rights, you have none. And that's really about as far as they go. And they say a lot of ear tickling things regarding your rights and enforcing your rights that all sound very good and everything. But if they don't go any further past that, then they've never really studied rights. They don't know what rights are. I don't want anybody to think that I'm singling anybody out, because I'm not. This is a conversation I have very often with people, whether it's in person or over the phone. You get talking to people about different issues regarding their rights, and they are very adamant about what rights they have and wanting to enforce them. Very often, there's times where it'll be in a court setting, and they want to enforce their rights. But at the same time, they want to go and question jurisdiction. Well, if you are trying to stand on rights that you believe that were granted to you by the Constitution, but you also want to turn around and question the state's jurisdiction, you're kind of voiding yourself out right there. Because you're not going to have one without the other. If you're going to claim something that came from source A, you cannot say that source A is also illegitimate. The courts may not be structured, or it may not be the type of court that you think that you're supposed to be in now, but I guarantee you, they have changed things over time. And whether you think you're supposed to be in Article 3 court, Article 2, Article 1 court, whatever the case may be. The bottom line is you're in the court you're in, and no matter what anybody tells you, nothing is magically going to change that. I spoke about our reason for being here in life and how our rights go hand in hand with this. And so I'm speaking not from a religious point of view, but more of a spiritual point of view. So I may mention the Creator. I won't mention God. God is just a title. There's many gods over many different things. Even the scripture said, not to worship other gods. Well, it wouldn't have said that if there weren't any other gods, would it? This may sound a little convoluted, but I promise this will all tie in together. I've spoke before about being young, and as a youngster, I got to mow the lawn, and my dad enjoyed, for some reason, I always thought, having a huge lawn. I've since found out that the reason why was because Mom preferred, at least while my sister and I were younger, to have a larger lawn. That way there would be more distance between the road and the house, which makes sense. And as I got older, it also became my responsibility to mow that lawn. And so I got a lot of time on that mower or behind the mower. I had a lot of time to think. And one of the things that went through my mind, I'm sure, is something that's gone through the minds of many of us. Why are we here? I didn't ask to be here. Why do I have to be here? Why do I have to be, mowing this lawn? Or why do I have to be digging these holes? Why do I have to be doing this? Why am I required to do that? I didn't ask to be here. We all go through different experiences in life that kind of prove different things to us. When I was 27 years old, I'll just ponder that for a minute, that magic age 27 when people die. I died in an auto accident and was brought back several times. Was not necessarily expected to even make it, but I did. Why did I make it? Well, while I was in a coma, for some reason, my mind and my body struggled and felt the courage and the gumption to keep pushing forward, and to stay alive. Something in me wanted to stay alive. Even though maybe I hadn't asked to be here, something inside of me wanted to be here. And that something is inside of all of us. There's many stories even of people talking about prior to being born, of even selecting their parents. I find some of those stories pretty fascinating. But maybe we did contract our way in here. But as long as we're here, guess what? While I was at home growing up, I had a responsibility to mow the lawn, take out the garbage, stack wood. And along with that, as you get older, your parents will give you a stipend, or they will give you a weekly allowance. I often have kind of thought that one of the purposes of the weekly allowance is so that the children aren't tugging on daddy's coat strings, wanting to borrow $5 here, $10 there, whatever the case may be. But you're given this weekly allowance. Well, guess what? If you want to keep receiving that weekly allowance, you keep mowing the lawn, or you keep getting good grades, or you keep, taking the garbage out or stacking the firewood. Because why? Because that right to that allowance that you think you have hinges on your responsibility to take care of the chores around the house. Unfortunately, I think a lot of people's offspring aren't learning this today. So many people are growing up with this real feeling or this right of entitlement. which couldn't be further from the truth. They should be taught these things. They should have had these chores at home or these responsibilities at home, because this is exactly what we learn as we get older in life. As we get older in life, we find that, guess what? You think you've got the right to do something? Well, I was talking about, these teachers that we're speaking about rights. They leave out a couple terms. If anybody gets deep into studying rights and learning what rights really are, you're going to quickly find that there are a couple other words that always accompany these rights, and they are duty and obligation, essentially responsibilities. Many of these people I've talked to regarding some of these different situations, they'll tell me, "Oh, my rights aren't contingent on anything. I'm not responsible to do anything for these rights. These are my rights." No, it's not the way it works. If you start reading any good literature that explains to you what rights are really about and how they work, you are going to quickly find out, very quickly, that they are all contingent on duty and obligation. Those words go hand in hand when you study these topics. You're not going to find the word rights mentioned without saying duty or obligation. That's always going to be side by side with them, because without one, you're not going to have the other. Just like without mowing the lawn, you're not going to receive your allowance. Guess what? The same thing happens as you get older, and uh, you get off from behind the grade school desk and maybe move into a job, and you have a bigger desk. Well, guess what? The bigger desk you're sitting behind, the bigger your duties and obligations are going to be. And you're not going to have these rights without fulfilling the duties and obligations. It's as simple as that. If you want to use someone else's property, they are going to have duties and obligations that have to be fulfilled in order for you to use their property, whether you think it's their property or your property. Either way, you're still going to end up having to use their property in one way or another. And along with that is going to come duties and obligations. Just like dad is going to let you keep borrowing the family car if you bring it home on empty every time. At least a good father wouldn't. He'd require you to put some gas, put some petrol in it when you bring it back. You can't just use up resources and not refill them. The same thing happens as you become an adult. You can't just use up resources of a company or of this world without replenishing these resources. And this world today is starting to see some environmental problems. And I believe a lot of that comes down to people not fulfilling their obligations in natural law. They're not going and replenishing these resources that they've been consuming or these resources that they've been using. These same situations come into play in our relationships. This is all natural law. It's all about relationships between things. It's what natural law is all about. And when we stop and wonder about, say, for instance, why we are even here, the Creator put us here for a reason. The Creator put together a beautiful realm, beautiful rivers, trees, mountains, you name it, nature is beautiful. But at the same time, it needed someone to tend to it. It needed somebody to take care of it. That's essentially the trustee position in a trust relationship, because this was the original trust relationship. And so, in order to enjoy the fruits of nature, somebody needed to pull the weeds or till the land or make sure that nature was being protected. And when you don't make sure nature is protected, you're going to fall prey to nature. That's just the way things work. Our personal relationships are exactly the same way. Everything is a quid pro quo situation. You scratch my back, I scratch yours. That's just the way everything works. If you don't scratch the other person's back, how can you expect them to scratch your back? You know, in our relationships, all these things are not something that is necessarily needed or mandatory, but there's situations that are there if we want the relationship to continue moving in the direction we want it to go in. If we want it to be a healthy relationship, your wife isn't going to marry you, or a husband isn't going to marry a wife necessarily because they're good at something or they need them to fulfill a duty in the house. If you need somebody that is good at cooking or good at being a carpenter or something like that, you're not going to marry them. You're going to hire that person. You'll just hire that job out. That's all you're going to do. No, these obligations and duties within a relationship are done because it provides for a healthy relationship. The same thing with our creator. Taking care of the household that was granted to all of this means a healthy relationship with the creator. If you borrow tools from somebody and you don't take care of those tools, or you even break a couple of them, or don't even return one or two of them and you go and give the toolbox back, how good of a relationship do you think you're going to have with that so-called friend that lent you those things? It's not going to be a very good relationship. That's just the way things work. This is all about service. In religious terms, they use the word obey. I prefer not to use the word obey. This is more of a spiritual relationship, even a spiritual relationship between the creator and us, or between our helpmate and us. They're both spiritual relationships. And it's not a matter of obeying, it's a matter of serving. Whenever you go out and you do something nice for somebody, you don't do it to feel good. You don't do it to feel important. You do it to help the other person out. But though at the same time, you get kind of a good feeling inside of yourself. Kind of makes you feel good about yourself. You're happy with yourself because you're actually doing something to promote a community well-being. And it's the same thing in any other kind of relationship, whether it's with the creator or with a spouse. We are serving them out of love. Sure, this also may be responsibility and duty, and then you may receive rights or benefits from that, but you're doing this service because it's the right thing to do. And that really changes the whole temperament of any relationship. When people just focus on rights, 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 I know my rights, you know, that's more of a mindset of just taking. Just taking doesn't provide for a healthy relationship. If you're in a relationship, with your spouse, and all you do is just take, take, take from them and never give, that relationship's not going to last very long. If you're in a relationship with a creator and you think you can just take, take, take all the time, and then the day turns around where you're in some serious troubles and you need a higher force to fall back on, do you think that higher force is going to be there for you? No, that's up to the higher force. There's nothing in natural law saying that that higher force has to be there for you. This is just something I wanted to bring across to people, regarding rights, because duty and responsibility go hand in hand with it. Our right to life and be here that was provided to us by the Creator also means that we've got some duties and obligations as well. And I kind of laugh at the people that say that, They have no duty. They have no obligation. They don't have to do anything. God, just ask them a simple question. Do you have to lean over to kiss your wife? Huh. So yeah, you do have to give up something. You do have to put some effort into something, don't you, to get what you want? And how come when it comes to the matter of just taking, all of a sudden people forget about obligation or responsibility or duties? Like I said, this is a quid pro quo situation. You're not going to have one without the other. That's just natural law. That's the basis of all natural law right there, like it or not, is what it is. And so if you're listening to somebody teach or whatever, and they're teaching about rights, and they're just saying that, you don't have any rights if you don't exercise them, or if you don't know your rights, you don't have any, but they don't educate you on the other side of the fence about the obligation and duty, then you know that you're listening to somebody who has never studied this topic, because you can go to probably any good source that covers this, that covers rights, and you're going to find, like I said, joined at the hip, obligation and duty. They're going to be right there side by side. And that was just the message for this evening. I don't know if we have anybody else here with us. Anybody wants to bring anything up? People are welcome to do so. I should jump over and unmute the board. If you have any noise going on in the background, guess what? We'll be able to hear the slightest thing. Trust me. So I'm going to unmute everybody. Anybody has anything to bring up, feel free to do so. Otherwise, we can call this a night, because I think this is something that people should put some serious thought into, put some serious consideration into, because you just don't get to take in life without giving. It's never going to happen that way. You're going to have a tough row to hoe if you think that that's the way it works, or a tough hoe to row, however you want to look at it. It's going to be difficult, because everything is a quid pro quo relationship. Well, I guess we'll see everybody next Sunday night. Appreciate everybody being here. And every Sunday night, 9 p.m. Eastern. Sometimes we're here for a half hour. Sometimes we're here for an hour and a half. Might be having Micah Dank come back with us. I noticed while I was speaking, I received a message from him. People don't know who Micah Dank is. His name is spelled Micahdank. Lots of interviews out there online with him. He's written some books. I recommend buying them, listening to one of his interviews. They're pretty enlightening. And you will probably end up looking at scripture in a very different way, guaranteed. Like I said, every week, learn who you really are, where you're really from, and where you're really at, because you've been deceived on all three of those.